Thank you, Mark. We now go on to the seconder of the motion, and that's the PCS.
Chair, Conference Mohammed Shafiq of PCS Union. Over the last 70 or so days, the world has seen the evil of war and destruction in Ukraine. That is why my union, PCS, has condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine and called for the withdrawal of Russian forces. The Russian government's violence has caused thousands of Ukrainian deaths, cities under siege, and 1.5 million refugees fleeing their homes. That is why we should, as trade unions, stand with the people of Ukraine in their time of suffering. But the war has once again highlighted the racism within European societies that Black and Asian people have gone through. Journalists have documented the racist treatment towards stranded people of color. With bombs falling around them, the only route out of the conflict was via trains, where white women and their children were the only ones allowed to board the trains, even when there were seats empty. According to one personal testimony, at least one group of Arab students who had managed to get access to a car was stopped by Ukrainian military forces and made to get out. Ukrainian women and children were put in the car. Instead, with the students left to walk to the Polish border. How can anyone defend this blatant and open racism? Conference, this hasn't happened in a vacuum. There have been decades of racism towards people of color. In many parts of Europe, it is embedded in everyday life, and for some, it's rooted in a colonial past. We must condemn this racism, and governments across Europe must not allow this to happen again, and we must hold the Ukrainian government to account on their racism. But this racism extended the response from Poland, Hungary, and surrounding countries, who said if you're white and from Ukraine, you're welcome. You'll get a warm welcome. If you're Asian, Black, or Arab, you are not welcome. The European Union, which talks of eradicating racism, was completely silent on the experience of racism on its own external borders and carried out by their own member states. In Poland, Polish neo-Nazi groups were encouraged by the police to attack Black students. And we've seen it here in the UK as well. This Tory government introducing £350 payments for people to host homes for Ukrainian refugees, whilst thousands of Afghan refugees are still living in hotels with their families waiting for schools and future homes. Let me be clear that we do not oppose the support being offered to Ukrainian refugees. As trade unionists, we welcome it. However, this should be offered.
Thank you, Mohammed. Can you start to wind up, please?
Coming to the end. The war in Ukraine has laid bare that ugly and evil racism. Conference, finally, we've seen the double standards of Western foreign policy play out in response to Ukraine. If innocent life is killed in Ukraine, we are told to stand with the oppressed. But when an innocent Palestinian life is killed at the hands of the occupier Israel, Western governments, commentators blame the oppressed. This biased policy must change. And Conference, I ask you to support the motion.